Hello, you're watching Smart Money, and today we're once again catching up with Sean Walsh, who's CEO of KAL Group, one of South Africa's leading agri-fuel and convenience specialty retailers listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And we're going to be tackling just a few common misconceptions about the company. And Sean, I'm going to jump straight into it. Right at the top, what are the three things most people don't know about the group that you wish they knew?
Hi, Alicia. Well, firstly, we're the largest redistributor of packaging material to the fruit export sector of South Africa. Amongst others, we sell nearly 1 million export pallets. And on each pallet, about 16,000 rands worth of fruit is packed. So that's 16 billion rands worth of fruit that gets exported on just the wooden pallets that we sell. That's the first one. The second one is we are by far the largest independent operator of fuel and convenience sites in South Africa. At those sites, an interesting term we use is there are over 300 retail touchpoints that are available to consumers at those sites at PEG. And then the third one I would mention is that due to the high cash generative nature and capability of the business, the group is very well positioned for growth. Now, so it's interesting that growth is all about choice. You've got to choose to grow because the easiest thing is not to grow, because growth is never easy. Growth requires a challenging environment that's changing all the time. So I think those are the three things I'd like people to know about us.
Okay, so that on the one side of the coin. On the flip side of that, what are some of the common assumptions or misperceptions that investors, analysts, or other stakeholders have about the group that aren't true?
Well, definitely the first one is that the agricultural contribution within the business is totally overstated by most investors, still to this day. Although we have diversified the business largely from being very agriculturally focused to agriculture and the rest of the farm to fork chain. And that sometimes, like when the US tariffs hit, investors expected our results to go down. What was interesting, for example, this year is that our results are going to be astounding. In a time when tariffs were implemented, it just proves that diversification into all the water-intensive areas of South Africa has played off for us, and that we are not so prone to the agricultural cyclical nature. The second point I would raise is that our large debtors book is often seen as a large risk to us. I mean, our debtors book does run at 2 to 2.5 billion rand in a year at its peak, and I would remind investors to have a look at our expected credit loss ratio and our not within terms and our write-offs that we have, and compare them to the best commercial bank in South Africa, and you will see that our rates and our metrics are much better. And what that talks to is that because we've diversified our farmer base and relied on the water-intensive areas, we actually have a lower credit loss ratio than most other agricultural companies, as well as most commercial banks. So it's been a particular strategy we followed that has given us actually such a healthy debtors book. I suppose the last one is that our convenience, our contribution that convenience sales has in our business is understated. Now, PEG's business is a 13 billion rand business. It is nearly as big as Food Lovers Market on its own as a business segment. And inside there, the jewel is the convenience retailer. And this year we've just hit 2 billion rands with the sales at an average margin of 32 to 34%. And if you go and compare that to the building materials sector running at 12 and 13% margins, then it makes a lot of sense for us to grow that part of our business. So those are the three things that I would advise investors we are different in.
I want to take a step back to your first point, the agri space, because when it comes to Agrimark, there's also a strong perception, Sean, that you only, serve commercial farmers. But who really shops at Agrimark, and what kind of growth are you seeing in that market?
So it is true that we have agri-marks in South Africa which serve up to 80% non-agriculture, like a Stellenbosch. Stellenbosch Agrimark is well known for its great workwear range, its great garden range, its amazing pet range and accessories. It's hunting and outdoor ranges. And by chance, there is quite a large agricultural store on the outside, which also still serves the farmers' fertilizer and chemical and etc. needs. Over time, we've in our diversification strategy over the period 2011 to today, we've taken some of our Agrimarks, SKUs from 5 or 6,000 in terms of the product range up to 20,000. We therefore compete very favorably with even a builder's warehouse in some cases. And it is just this quiet work that we're doing in the background to be the builder's warehouse of the rural area, the Boere Massmart, as some have called us, and it is in our range that we offer a different range, different product range. And then the customer that comes to us is now not just the farmer, but his friends, the friends of the family, as we call them, and then the fur family, which is so important to us. Very few people know that Agrimark is one of the largest pet food retailers in South Africa. So it's quite interesting that it's obviously just not farmers, but the whole farm to fork consumer chain.
Look, this lifestyle experience you've created in this space has been quite something. When it comes to PEG, though, which you added to bulk up resilience against the volatility of the agri sector, how do you manage on this end fluctuations in something like the fuel price? Because something you've highlighted before is that a small change in the fuel price, let's call it 5 Rand, can shift revenue by as much as 250 million Rand in a month. And yet it has little bearing on gross profit. So talk us through that.
Okay, so the rules in the fuel game is that about half the fuel sold in South Africa is petrol, and the petrol margin is set by the regulator. So let's just take a number that if the current fuel price was 20 Rand and the regulator has set the petrol margin at 2 Rand, then you're making 10% margin. But as you say, if the fuel price moves by 5 Rand, we sell 50 million litres a month. So we'd have 250 million more revenue, but we still only made 2 Rand a litre margin because it's set by the regulator. And therefore our margin would have stayed the same, probably dropped down to about an 8% margin, just because the fuel price has now lifted. And obviously, conversely, if it drops by 5 Rand, we have a lower revenue and the margin looks great. But what's really important is that in the fuel game, you've got to sell litres and you make your money by making that margin per litre.
Okay, so with clarity on these fronts now and keeping an eye on the ball instead, looking ahead, what's the one strategic priority, would you say, for KAL Group that you believe investors and customers should be paying the most attention to over, let's call it, the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, most certainly our digital rollout of tools to the farming sector. I think there are two, obviously always for us, there will be two major things. That's going to be critical to make it really easy for a farmer to do business with us. A quick example is we put auto tank gauging on the farm tanks, for fuel tanks. And that gauge tells us when the farmer's fuel is getting down to 25%. And digitally will communicate with the farmer and ask him if he wants to order, because last year, in the 5 weeks post this measurement, he utilized X amount of liters of fuel, because it's now clever and it can look at the system and doesn't need a person to go and calculate it. That's just one intervention, and there'll be many more that will roll out. On the convenience side, what we have found is that loyalty schemes are extremely important. And if we have launched our own Imaliyam, My Money, in other words, program in the PEG group, because we have found that we need a aggregate system so that we don't have a situation where when Engen's program is not as good as Sasol's program, that you now lose Engen sales and they just run away to the Sasol. We need to. So that's why we've created our own Imalian program, loyalty, where as you spend on our sites, you are building points that you can then go into the convenience store and hopefully buy a pie or buy a Coke with that loyalty program. So those are the two very exciting things we're doing at the moment.
And lots for your customers to look forward to. Sean, thanks so much for joining us today and giving us those insights. It's clear that there is far more depth to the group than many realize, and these clarifications will certainly help investors and customers alike understand the business better. Sean Walsh is CEO of KAL Group.